A highway patrol officer, Bob Hayward, from Salt Lake City, sits in his car outside his Hogan Street home, just ending his shift. A tan Volkswagen Beetle drives by without its headlights on. Hayward, familiar with his neighborhood, immediately senses this car doesn't belong. He follows it, watching it pull up directly in front of his neighbor's house. The homeowners are out of town, leaving their 17 and 19-year-old daughters home alone. Hayward flashes his brights to get a clear look at the license plate, startling the driver, who then speeds off. Hayward gives chase. The Beetle blows through one stop sign, then another, but Hayward is determined not to let the driver escape. A few minutes later, the car finally pulls over at an abandoned gas station. A man steps out, hands raised, dressed in blue jeans, a black turtleneck, and tennis shoes. He has shoulder-length dark hair and smells strongly of marijuana. Hayward points his gun. The man claims he's a lost student on his way home after watching Towering Inferno at the local drive-in. But Hayward had passed that theater earlier. Towering Inferno wasn't playing that night. The officer inspects the car and finds something peculiar. The passenger seat is gone. In its place sits an open bag containing unusual items: a ski mask, a crowbar, an ice pick, a box of trash bags, gloves, a pantyhose rope, and some wire. In the trunk, Hayward also uncovers a pair of handcuffs. "I'm arresting you tonight for evading an officer, sir," Hayward states, "but I intend to ask the county attorney to charge you with possession of burglary tools." Back at the police station, the man is processed and photographed. Despite having the tools, there's no direct evidence linking him to a burglary, so he's free to leave on bail. Bob Hayward remains deeply suspicious, convinced the man intended to break into his neighbor's house, where the two girls were alone. It would be much later that Hayward would learn the man he arrested that night was none other than America's most notorious killer, Ted Bundy, and capturing him for good would require far more effort. He wasn't a wild beast to look at, nor did he viciously foam at the mouth. He was thoughtful, charismatic, even personable, right up until he committed unspeakable acts. The 1970s and 80s marked the era of serial killers in the U.S. Names like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and Charles Manson became infamous. But one individual, Ted Bundy, stood out. He was handsome, articulate, and even likable. Theodore Robert Bundy was born on November 24, 1946. He was a bright child, growing up in what appeared to be a normal, working-class family. He described his home as wonderful, with 2 dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. He added that we, as children, were the focus of my parents' lives, where we regularly attended church. 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke, there was no gambling. There was no physical abuse or fighting in the home, but it was a fine, solid Christian home. Yet not everything was quite right with Ted. From as young as 3 years old, he displayed disturbing behaviors. He would arrange kitchen knives around his sleeping aunt. Playing in the forest, he frequently dissected mice. While swimming, he tried to drown others on more than one occasion, never showing any sign of guilt. For a few years, He and his mother lived with his grandparents. His family was religious, his grandfather a deacon, but this grandfather was also abusive and violent, a racist wife-beater and collector of violent pornography. Despite this, Bundy adored him, often sneaking peeks into his collection. Ted was intelligent and good-looking, but also deeply shy, a loner frequently bullied at school. He sometimes experienced severe outbursts of rage and struggled to fit in with his peers. During his early college years, Ted remained insecure with almost no social life. A significant positive memory for him was buying a tan Volkswagen in 1968, which he said gave him a sense of freedom and independence. Over time, Ted Bundy meticulously crafted a perfect facade. He transformed into a seemingly confident and charming young man, graduating with a psychology degree, dating girls, and even attending law school. Yet his interest in the law itself was superficial. As a teenager, Bundy had a long history of theft, though these records were expunged when he turned 18. However, the urge to commit crimes festered and grew within him. On February 1, 1974, Bundy broke into a student's home, abducting and killing his very first documented victim, Linda Ann Healy. Bundy's victims consistently shared a profile: attractive young women. He would approach them in public, feigning an injury or disability to lure them to his car. Once his charm and good looks convinced the women he posed no threat, he would beat them unconscious. For their bodies, he had a designated spot on the floor of his tan Volkswagen, precisely where the passenger seat once was. He would then drive to a secluded location where he brutally raped, strangled, and killed them, often continuing his depravity beyond that point. Month after month, more women vanished, first in Washington, then in Utah. The public grew terrified, and the police were desperate. For a very long time, no one had any idea who was responsible or how to find them. Before Ted Bundy, the concept of a serial killer barely existed in the public consciousness. His facade was meticulously maintained. He even worked briefly for the Seattle Crime Commission and authored a rape prevention pamphlet for women. Bundy understood how to avoid leaving evidence. DNA tests hadn't been invented yet, and even if police found anything, law enforcement agencies at the time rarely shared information across state lines. But on November 8, 1974, Ted Bundy made a critical error. He left a witness alive. If these murders happened today, the hunt for Bundy might have ended much sooner. Fingerprint matching and advanced computing techniques have revolutionized police work over recent decades. Data science is now indispensable in countless fields. And it's not magic. 18-year-old Carol Darrench drove her 1974 maroon Camaro into the parking lot of a Sears mall. She parked under a light and entered the store, looking for books. Standing outside a bookstore, a man approached her. He introduced himself as Officer Rosend from the Murray Police Department, polite and well-dressed. "Someone was trying to break into your car," he said, asking if she wanted to check for anything missing. She agreed, and they returned to the parking lot. Carol checked her Camaro. Everything was accounted for. The police officer then told her the suspect was back at the station, and if she joined him, they could file a complaint. Carol detected a faint scent of alcohol and began to feel uneasy, but the officer displayed a badge, and she agreed to accompany him. They walked to his vehicle, but it wasn't a police car. It was a tan Volkswagen Beetle. Perhaps he's undercover, Carol thought, feeling a growing nervousness, but she got into the car nonetheless. A few minutes later, the man stopped at an elementary school. He suddenly grabbed her arm and handcuffed her. Carol screamed as he pulled out a gun. Terrified, she luckily realized her handcuffs weren't attached to anything. She lunged for the door and quickly leaped out of the car. The man pursued her. pulling out a crowbar. He struck her once, then twice, but Carol bravely held up her arms in defense, fighting for her life. As another car approached, Carol managed to break free, ran away, and jumped into the other vehicle. She drove directly to the police station, reporting the man who called himself Officer Rosen and his tan Volkswagen Beetle. The man Bob Hayward arrested so disturbed him that the very next day he mentioned the encounter to his brother, Captain Pete Hayward, a homicide detective. Detectives at the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office instantly recognized the car. A year prior, a woman in Seattle had reported suspicious behavior from her boyfriend, noting that an eyewitness drawing from a kidnapping case strongly resembled him. Her boyfriend also owned a tan Volkswagen. With 10 women now missing, and this man on their list of suspects, detectives began connecting the dots. They invited Carol Derrinch to a police lineup. 8 suspects stood in line, including the man Bob Hayward had arrested weeks earlier. The moment Carol Derrinch saw them, she immediately identified the fake officer. On March 1st, 1976, Bundy was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the attempted kidnapping of Carol Derrinch. The investigation gained momentum, and police soon linked him to another case, the disappearance of 23-year-old Karen Campbell. In October 1976, Bundy was extradited to Colorado to face trial again, this time for murder. If only his story ended there. During his second trial, Bundy chose to defend himself in court. Being a law student, he was remarkably confident in this decision. As a result, the judge granted him more freedoms than other prisoners, including a typewriter, a desk, unlimited and untaped phone calls, and access to the courthouse law library, where he could move freely without shackles or handcuffs. While his trial was in full swing, during a recess, he went to the library. His guard was outside in the hallway, smoking a cigarette. It was a sunny day, the sky a clear blue, when Ted Bundy suddenly leaped from a second-story window. The fall was jarring, but upon landing, he immediately sprinted across the street, over a fence, and into an alleyway. From there, he dashed to a river, and then directly into the mountains. Bundy had meticulously planned this escape for weeks, jumping from his bunk bed to strengthen his ankles, meticulously rehearsing his exact escape route again and again, putting on a second layer of clothing under his courtroom attire, practicing how quickly he could change, even getting a haircut and shaving his beard. A woman rushed into the courthouse, informing a guard she'd seen a man jump from a window. Guards immediately swept the floor. From the moment Bundy jumped, it took them 10 minutes to realize he was gone. Police set up roadblocks, dispatched bloodhounds into the mountains, and urged residents to lock their doors. Radio stations and newspapers quickly covered the escape, and now 150 policemen were hunting a killer on the loose. Ted Bundy wandered through the mountains with nothing. No money, no food, no plan, only a light shirt, his pants, and, given his self-defense, a map of the area used in the trial. For a full day, he hiked up grassy hills, managing to cross Aspen Mountain by nightfall. The next morning, however, was cold and rainy. Instead of heading further south, he tracked back and found a small cabin where he spent the night. On day 3, Bundy left the cabin better equipped, having found some food, warm clothes, and a rifle. On this day, the FBI joined the manhunt, bringing in helicopters. Despite having the map, Bundy got lost when a rainstorm hit, becoming even more disoriented. The biting cold took its toll. He eventually started walking in circles, ending up back at the cabin, where he discovered tracks from the search party. They were on to him. For 5 full days, Bundy hiked through the hills, his ankles swollen and food supply dwindling. He found himself back in Aspen. His only chance of escape was to find a car, and at a golf course, he finally located an old Cadillac with the keys still inside. It was the morning of the 6th day of Bundy's escape when two police officers spotted a Cadillac zigzagging erratically on the road. They pulled the car over, assuming it was a drunk driver. Instead, they found a sober but severely weakened Ted Bundy. He had lost over 20 pounds and could barely steer the car. His nose was wrapped in a bandage, and he wore glasses, yet the officers easily recognized him. He was arrested just 2 blocks from where he had jumped out of the window. Back in custody, Bundy now also faced charges for escape. He was required to wear shackles and handcuffs when in court, but it mattered little to him. Almost immediately, he began planning another escape. A guard brought Ted Bundy a warm meal to his cell and left. Bundy didn't touch it. Instead, he lifted himself into a small hole in his ceiling. In the weeks leading up to this, he had used a hacksaw, obtained from another inmate, on an already loose light fixture to cut open a hole large enough to fit through. To do this, he had to lose weight, which he achieved by consistently complaining about the food as a cover. Bundy was meticulously prepared. He had accumulated $700 from donations for his defense. In the weeks preceding his escape, he regularly used this hidden access point, searching for an exit. He found one. The vent led to a small apartment belonging to a prison guard. Bundy crawled through the narrow shaft. Upon reaching the apartment, he heard voices. The guard and his wife were eating dinner. Bundy waited patiently for his moment. "Let's go to a movie tonight," the woman suggested. "Sure, why not?" the guard replied. A few minutes later, the door slammed shut. Bundy dropped silently into the apartment's bedroom. He changed into a pair of blue jeans, a gray turtleneck, and blue tennis shoes, then simply walked out the front door and onto the street. This time, it would take the guards 17 hours to realize what had happened. Bundy had long since vanished. It was a quiet night on campus. Most parties had ended, and the local nightclub had been closed for over an hour. Nita Neri was returning from a date with her boyfriend when she attempted to enter her sorority house, Chi Omega. She noticed the door was unlocked. Entering, she found the lights still on. Seconds later, she heard a loud noise from upstairs, followed by hurried footsteps. A man came rushing down the stairs, holding some kind of club. He hastily opened the front door and ran outside. Nita woke the others, and they soon realized a monster had been in their house. 4 young women had been assaulted. 2 of them would die. In the weeks that followed, Ted Bundy attempted to abduct multiple women, failing each time until he encountered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. The young girl was outside in the ring, running across a basketball court toward another classroom at her school when Bundy signaled her to come over. She did. David Lee, a patrol officer from Pensacola, was in his car when an orange Volkswagen passed by with its lights off. Lee knew his area intimately and immediately recognized the car as likely not belonging there. He followed the driver and checked the license plate. The car was stolen. Lee activated his police lights, and the Volkswagen sped away. But David Lee had no intention of letting this man escape. A few minutes later, the Beetle finally stopped. Bundy must have experienced an unsettling sense of déjà vu at this moment. This time, Bundy didn't just step out of the car with his hands up. He didn't claim to be a student lost on his way home from a movie. This time, Bundy decided to fight. He got out of the car as the officer pointed a gun at him. When Lee attempted to cuff Bundy, Bundy hit him in the face and kicked him off his feet. The officer fired a warning shot, and Bundy ran. Lee, now in pursuit directly behind Ted, fired another shot, and the man fell to the ground. But Bundy hadn't been shot. It was a ruse to grab the officer's gun. He failed. The officer struck Bundy with his pistol and managed to arrest him. The relentless hunt for America's most infamous killer had finally concluded. Bundy's trial for the horrific Chi Omega sorority house murders began, and soon after, he faced court for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. In both cases, Bundy attempted to defend himself and pleaded not guilty. 1 month later, on July 23rd, Ted Bundy was sentenced to death. Days before his execution, Bundy confessed to a total of 36 murders, though newer DNA evidence suggests he may have killed over 100 people, potentially beginning his spree as early as age 14. What makes Ted Bundy's trial so remarkable isn't just his charming and likable demeanor, the sheer brutality of his crimes, or even the fact that he managed to escape prison twice. What truly set Bundy's trial apart was the trial itself. It was the first in U.S. history to be broadcast on national television. Since he defended himself in court, he had numerous opportunities to display his captivating personality to the public, and many, especially young women, were undeniably fascinated by him. Spectators were asked, "Are you a little scared when you look at him?" Responses varied, from "Yes, it scares me to be in the same room with him, but I know there's other people in there," to "I'm not afraid of him. He just doesn't look like the type to kill somebody." Others admitted, "Every time he turns around, I kind of get that feeling. No, you know, he's going to get me next, but yet you're fascinated by him, very, very." When asked why, they simply replied, "I don't know." Among all the women in the courtroom, one stood out, Carol Ann Boone, Bundy's girlfriend, who believed in his innocence almost until the very end. He proposed to her during the court proceedings. After his conviction, and they even had a child together, he asked, "Carol, do you want to marry me?" She replied, "Yes, and I want to marry you. Yes, I." Bundy's trials became an unprecedented media sensation. People across the country watched a killer fighting for his life, attempting to evade his inevitable fate again and again for years. On the final day before his execution, television crews from all over the country converged on Florida State Prison. Thousands of people gathered outside, carrying signs and setting off fireworks. At one point, a macabre celebration spiraled out of control, with T-shirts being sold and crowds chanting, "Burn Bundy, burn." On January 24, 1989, after spending 10 years on death row, Bundy was executed via electric chair. The person who flipped the switch was a woman, signifying the enduring hatred Bundy had inspired even in death.